Well, I really don't have time to be here, but I'm gonna use time to be here. We have a respiratory virus going around among the cats. It's keeping me extremely busy, so I have not been back for a while, and it will remain limited indefinitely. We'll see. But the news is big. A lot of news, actually, not just, you know, Jordan Lesley being fired, and hope that didn't come as a shock to you. You almost certainly have heard that by now. But I'll be talking about that. Of course, it's all over the internet, but I will put my own spin on it, as I usually do. And there's also some player issues, injuries and such to talk about. Just real quickly, this is West Virginia Football Going Deep. I am Forrest Postman. Please subscribe. Now, Jordan Lesley, and Lesley's not just, a coach. He is Neal Brown's friend. They have worked together for 10 years. They've worked well together. So this was a very difficult thing to do. I don't like it, but I agree with it. Something had to be done. And I think this was closest to the problem. Now, keep in mind, up until, 4 years ago, something like that, Lesley was a defensive line coach, and he was good at it. That's why Brown brought him with him to West Virginia, and why he eventually ended up as defensive coordinator. Being a good line coach does not necessarily make you a good coordinator, and that may be where things started to slide. I like a lot of Lesley's coaching philosophy. I like how he approaches players. I'll get to some of what I haven't liked in a moment. But having the overall, charge of and play calling. We talk about play calling on offense, and Neal Brown is, he prefers to call his plays. Chad Scott is probably somebody Neal Brown would trust to call plays eventually. But I think Brown is bringing Scott along much the way he does players, a bit at a time as they are ready. Although, Scott may never call plays at West Virginia, and he probably will be a head coach someplace else in the next year or two. But Neal Brown can't call plays for the defense. He's not a defensive coach. And it's not really entirely clear how much of the problem has been in coaching, how much has really been play calling. I mean, the whole play, the concept of the defense from week to week. When Lesley became sort of a roaming defensive coordinator, rather than being one of the linebacker coaches, he just sort of became an overall move from place to place with an extra focus on the defensive backfield when Dante Wright left. And the theory was that you would make sure corners, safeties, and spear, one voice. It's a good theory. But, of course, you had Shadon Brown as the primary coach, but Jordan Lesley as the primary voice. As defensive coordinator, his voice would be the main voice. So you may have still had actually an increased level of conflict. Shadon Brown and Jordan Lesley may get along great in many ways, but if their voices are different, in particular ways, it could have caused more conflict. And players too frequently did not, I mean, you had players who were essentially playing different defenses, which may represent a split in the coaching. I don't know, that's a guess. But, I think Lesley is a good coach, not necessarily a good coordinator, or maybe not yet a good coordinator. I brought that up, maybe it was spring of this year, or possibly, I think, maybe a couple of times, but with Matt Moore, who has coached offensive line for a long time. And, he seems to be happy there. And I could see Matt Moore being an offensive line coach for the rest of his career, and there is no problem with that. You do not have to move up to coordinator. And maybe that would be best for Lesley. Now, at the other hand, somebody on one of the boards brought up the possibility of just demoting Lesley, which doesn't necessarily work, but particularly there's no place to put him. You don't want to move him to defensive line coach because you've got a very good defensive line coach, and you don't want conflict there. And in many respects, it can be easier to move on than move down. Now, going back, probably 3 years, the last 3 years before I even had this channel, every year I have said that the defense was going to be more aggressive. And it has not been. And I understand the philosophy, because, Lesley talks about, if you bring pressure, you give up coverage. And that's true. And if the coverage isn't in a position to deal with that, it can be a problem. But I have to start thinking that, I just don't think he brings pressure enough. I don't think he's quite creative enough with the pressures or the deception. And that's the thing, a defense, and this, it's not a 3-3-5, but it has a whole lot in common with the 3-3-5 that Castile ran. And one of the things Castile talked about was the importance of concealing the defense you were bringing. And, then of course, pressure was important. And, Lesley has talked about, various people have talked about bringing pressure, but never letting people know from where. With this defense, you can bring it from several spots. And I don't think Lesley was good enough, creating deception, and maybe doesn't emphasize it in his philosophy of the defense, and couldn't bring himself to bring pressure as much. You look at the risk and benefits, and he kept coming down on the safer side, and I think maybe too much. So maybe that mentality not right for a defensive coordinator, and maybe it's just not right for this defense. It's quite conceivable that Jordan Lesley could be a very good defensive coordinator with a different defensive style. I don't know. But I do think there was just something, and a defensive coordinator new at it. You expect him maybe to take time, but changes didn't make it better. Now, people are telling you, Jeff Koonz gets promoted to defensive coordinator, even though Shadon Brown was co-defensive coordinator with Jordan Lesley. And maybe there was a problem with that connection. But Shadon Brown, your co-defensive coordinator, doesn't get the spot. And it seems surprising, but it probably shouldn't be. Now, some people say it means that Shadon Brown's going to be fired. If that was determined, I think they would do so. But, of course, if you get rid of both Lesley and Shadon Brown at the same time, you do leave quite a gap in your coaching staff. And right now, they may just play games shifting, different people around, bump up their responsibilities a bit. There are a whole number of people who could take on more responsibility. I know Jeff Castile retired, but in theory they might even ask him to do a little bit. I don't know. I'd like it. I like Castile, but hey, I want him to enjoy his life however he sees fit. But the big thing, I think Shadon Brown has these 4 games to prove he wasn't part of the problem. And if he is going to do that, he probably needs to be focused on coaching and sorting out the defensive backfield. He doesn't have time to suddenly become defensive coordinator and sort everything. Now, of course, on one hand, if he were the defensive coordinator, he's got the power to run everything his way, which could mean more control over the defensive backfield. But it just means so much more time dealing with the bigger picture, and I don't think he has the time to do that and fix what problems he can in the backfield, whether it was communication, whether it was conflicting communication, whatever. He's got 4 games to prove that he can do it, and I think he needs to focus on that. And then we see what happens. Now, Koonz, he was, I think he was a co-defensive coordinator, maybe at Cincinnati. I've lost track. It's been mentioned online several places, but this is not brand new to him. He has not been talked about a lot. We don't see him, haven't seen him in many press conferences. He's kind of been under the radar, but special teams have been very good this year, mostly. Now, he has the players to work with. So we'll see. I think part of the question is, will he be more aggressive? I really think that's important. Doesn't have a lot of time to fix any problems with players being able to conceal the defense. But hopefully he will not come up with any defenses or call coverages that put a linebacker on the best receiver twice. And it was kind of clear in Neal Brown's press conference Monday that the second time that happened probably was last straw sort of thing. That it was not just a disconnect with the players. There was a problem with how Lesley was calling defenses. So, that's something that you fix by firing the person calling the defenses. And I think, that's a big thing. Why not fire Shadon Brown? He was not calling the defenses. And I think the game planning and the calling were the downfall for Lesley. And again, that is something that Shadon Brown did not control. As co-defensive coordinator, he has input, but he does not have control. So now we see what happens when Koonz has control. Yeah, and of course, people are thinking, hey, does this make Neal Brown's job safer? Probably. I don't think it was in tremendous danger. I think Baker has always leaned towards the idea that unless you lose the team, he's still going to give you a chance. There's some talk that Jordan Lesley may have lost the defensive players. I don't know. And that's not the kind of thing you want defensive players to be commenting on until years from now. Okay, other things. Injury updates particularly, because there's some important things going on in that regard. Eddie Vestorinen is confirmed out for the season. He will take a medical red shirt. Brown says that he'll be ready to go in January. So I think Jackson should be able to play. I mean, he was close to full speed last week. He gets, the bye week. And he has definitely been good. Green is uncertain. He said he's still having problems. So even with the bye week, he may not be ready to play. A lot of chatter, of course, about that. And who will start if Green's healthy. And Brown says, hey, moot point, he's not yet healthy. Deal with that when he is healthy. And, of course, you can see how he's playing. Definitely a moot point if he does not get healthy. And, we don't know whether it's a concussion issue or what. There's a lot of talk. We don't know. Wyatt Milam should practice this week, be back for the game. That is very good news. Aubrey Burks is a big, big question mark. It's not clear if Neal Brown really knows. And you get lots and lots of chatter that Burks may be done. Now, of course, some people want to assume that it's because he's upset with the team. I don't think there is any indication of that. I think, Aubrey Burks would play football just for the love of playing football. But when a player goes down on the sideline, that is scary. I mean, as soon as it was like, hey, he's down. He wasn't playing. He was just on the sideline, and something happened. That is really worrisome. And I at that moment was worried that it was something long-term serious. Now, he has played some since then. He has not played much. He has not played well. And is it in any way directly or indirectly connected to last year's injury? I don't know. We were told that tests were negative this time around, but we weren't told what tests. But I don't, if he is done for the year, I don't think it's because he wants to step aside. And I don't think he's just saving himself for the NFL because, well, as he said, this was his contract year. This was to determine his spot in the NFL. And right now, if he comes back to play after the season, if he goes in for the draft, free agent is pretty much his best shot, his only shot. So I think if he can, he will play. But he may not be able to. And that sucks rocks for the team and for Burks. It just sucks. He's the kind of guy you just like. Okay. I'm going to end on a positive note. Thank goodness. Oh, my gosh. Kyle Altuner and Corey McIntyre both expected to practice in pads, possibility of playing. Now, of course, Altuner, freshman, don't even know where he would be on the depth chart right now, despite, his talent. And we're not doing a lot of substituting on the line. So I think they may want to get him into some games if they can. Only 4 games left, so he can't burn his red shirt. We need Corey McIntyre. Kinsler and Gabriel have done well in limited work. They're getting better, but they are young. McIntyre, of course, isn't that much older, but depth is an issue on the defensive line now. So having those 2 guys back is very good news for this year and for next year. Get them some playing time. And I said I was going to end on that. I'm not, because I forgot something. I didn't have it on my list, even though it was one of the main things I wanted to talk about. Also, Israel Boyce and Zay Jennings will be getting increased playing time. They've been getting increased playing time. Of course, Jennings made that fantastic tackle at the 12 on the kickoff for the third quarter. It was fast, it was beautiful, it was clean, it was what you want to see. And I think he was in for 8 plays on defense. And this has brought up the whole thing of Jennings should have been playing all year. Neal Brown is afraid to play young players. And that's garbage. Utter, total, freaking garbage. Zay Jennings is doing well now because he has been brought along carefully. If he had been tossed in earlier, and actually he was tossed in earlier, and he made a couple of critical mistakes. Made some good plays, but critical mistakes too. And he's not ready to play full-time or even a lot of time. Just more as you go. Now, Neal Brown not playing young players. For guys who played a lot, either first or second year, Wyatt Milam, Tomas Rimac, Jaheim White, Traylon Ray, C.J. Donaldson, Rodney Gallagher, Hudson, Clement. That's just the offense. And defense, Trotter and Lathan, Aubrey Burks. Seems like there have been 1 or 2 more. But Brown tries to play the player who is going to be best for the team. And sometimes, offensive line, the reason if you add Frazier into that, the reason we have had so many very young freshmen playing is because the decision to go young for the long term, to build a better team. But Coach Brown will play young players when it's the best option, when they are ready. If he does not play them, it's because either they're not ready or the guy ahead of them, warts and all, is still the best option for the team. And I've said before, he knows more about that than we do. But to say that Jennings should have played more because he's been coached into playing better now is just seriously flawed logic, to the degree that it's logic at all. And to say that Neal Brown won't play young players is factually nonsense. All right. Okay, that's not a positive note. So, Altuner and McIntyre practicing, potentially playing. That's the good news. Now we just have to make it to Cincinnati. And I said I was going to be in and out quick. That's over and gone. But I do have to go feed and medicate and check on cats. So I don't know when I will see you next, but hopefully I will see you next. So long.